Good morning, guys. Welcome out to Revolution this morning. Sorry, I've got a low voice. It's actually very early in the morning here. It's just 6 o'clock in the morning. This is a completely unplanned video, but I was just going through the KJV Parallel Bible. Someone on the Textus Receptus Academy had posted um, that this was a good site to go to, and I can see that people who are not thoroughly informed would go to sites like this and think, wow, this is pretty good. And I'm not saying that absolutely everything on this site is bad, but I'm just going to show you a few examples. But because what I started to do was I started to just go through a few verses that I know where there are changes in the critical text between the Textus Receptus and the critical text. And clearly, Mark Ward doesn't have the scholarship to even know that there are differences there. And so, when Mark Ward was building this website, he jumped on, um, I think it was Robert Truelove's group, and it could be another group. I'm not sure. It was, I think, about 5 years ago, perhaps. And he was saying, he's building this website, and he wants to show the differences between the Textus Receptus and the critical text. And so I thought, okay, I'll just go through Matthew chapter 1, and I'll have a good look. And so I found four places where he hadn't acknowledged that the Greek text was different in between the TR and the critical text. And so I pointed these four out to him, and he changed three of them. And so I just thought to myself, if he's prepared to change, three of those, I just don't think that this website is worth much, because, like, if he had turned around and explained to me why he didn't include those three, I'd say, I'd say, okay, no worries. And so I actually gave him four. But he just went straight away and included them, and I thought that is just a sign of poor scholarship. And so on my Textus Receptus Academy, I'm just gonna jump on there, um, and so this is not a diss for the guy Robert who's put this up there, because he probably just doesn't really know how bad this website is. So I'm just showing him how bad it is, and I'm just using examples. And so what I said was, I said Mark Ward is constantly downplaying the importance of textual issues. He has made his parachurch ministry, funded by Lexham Press, around the readability of the KJV, as if this issue isn't known to the KJV defenders. The Trinitarian Bible Society have a booklet with 700 words that include the explanation for many archaic and obsolete words. D.A. Waite has the same type of thing in the margins of his defined King James Version. So White is ranting on about readability as a good enough reason to scrap the KJV. The problem is the KJV was formerly commissioned to be slightly revised when Westcott and Hort deceptively snuck in a new, never seen before Greek text. In doing so, they destroyed the confidence people have in revision. So he's basically saying, oh, the King James needs revision, it needs revision. And it's like, yeah, well, look at what happened the last time there was a major revision of the King James. So it's not even a King James revision, it's a completely different Bible. Um, they destroyed the Bible. They've destroyed the confidence in the Bible, and now there's just hundreds of versions based upon this new text. So people would much rather have a few obsolete or archaic terms than read the utter abortion of Westcott and Hort to the Nestle Aland 28 edition mess. When Ward made this site, he was asking people to go through on Facebook. I went through Matthew chapter 1 and found four places where he missed the translational distinction. He used three of those. So, so just in that one exercise, if 3 places in one chapter was in error, and there are 260 chapters in the New Testament. We could be looking at 700 to 800 places he has overlooked. So this exercise proved to me that his site is worthless. Also, he has the wrong list of Scrivener. He has the 59 to 60 list that Boyce and Berg use, but it is only part of the 190 list. If you know about these issues, it's just bad scholarship. It's just very poor scholarship. And so I was talking to this Stephen Boyce, but Stephen Boyce, what he would do is he would tag people like Elijah Hickson. If I just mention Elijah Hickson, he'd tag him in and say, this guy's saying this about you. And so Stephen Boyce was talking about how, he went through the 59 or 60 list of Scrivener. And I'm like, you've got the wrong list, because he said that he'd gone through the same list. And I'm like, no, I always talk about the 190 list that was in the TR edition, not in Appendix E that's linked to here. I'll just show you this. So he goes to the which TR question here, and he's basically got the completely wrong list. So here is Appendix E, but Appendix E isn't the be-all, end-all of changes from the text of Beza to the King James. It's actually the differences between Beza and Stephanus. So he's saying, see, there's differences between TR editions. Well, Textus Receptus is just a name. It was originally a name in the 1633, and then it just became adopted onto things like Scrivener's text. Became adopted onto the 1550 as well, and they just started calling it TR. And so it's just a name that they retroactively put upon pretty much all the Greek texts of that era. There was no competing Greek text other than these TR editions, okay? So they've just been called TR. So then he's trying to get these TR editions against each other, which is like, clearly we can see there's a progression. The Complutensian Polyglot, then we see the 5 editions of Erasmus, then we see the 4 editions of Stephanus, then we see the 9 editions of Beza, and then we see, well, actually 5 editions of Beza, and then we see the King James Version, which is the final edition of the TR, as Edward Hill said. And the underlying text is the text that is the TR, the which TR. It's very easy to answer. And then we see that there are there are the Elzevas, and there was a couple of other mild TRs after that. But it's like they've only made this distinction between the TR and others because now there's other texts. Since Luckman, they've been printing non-TR texts, and so, but there was no competition. These were the received texts, and so in this Appendix E, this is just part of one of Scrivener's books. It's not the 190 list that Scrivener has. And so then they're trying to make out, there's these differences in the TR, as if this is just a bombshell. And I was sort of saying, like to Stephen Boyce, as he was like, oh, we were told that the blue bound Textus Scrivener was the TR, and we were shocked to find out there were other editions of the TR. And I was like, hang on, the Trinitarian Bible Society TR, it only has 2 pages in English at the beginning of it, and it lists like about 20 or 30 different other TRs in the beginning of it. And it clearly says, it summarizes it and says, well, this is pretty much basically the text of Beza with these 190 different amendments from Scrivener to match the 1611. And so I've gone through a lot of these 190 differences, and I've found that only 10% are translatable in most cases. Like, say, if I've gone through all the way through Matthew, none of them are really translatable. And so so he's basically got the wrong list here. So for a TR King James person, when you look at this, it's just like, why has he got that? And that's one of the things I was pointing out to Stephen Boyce. It's like, why have you got that there? what's the point? You just show, it's like showing a difference between Westcott and Hort and the Nestle text of 1904. It's like, okay, well, why have you got that there? What's that got to do with what's relevant today? And so they've just got the wrong list, and it just looks scholarly, and most people don't understand that it's the wrong issue. So I'm just going to quickly go through this because I've got to get going very soon. But I've just in like 20 minutes, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to point out to everyone some of the issues. And so if we just go, say, to Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. Now, I know this is a little pet beef of mine about where it says the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Now, the book of the generation, it's in the TR, and he's saying it's in the critical text. But see, this is very deceptive because the word generation there, even though it's the same Greek word, if you go down to verse 18, where it has the birth of Jesus Christ, in the Textus Receptus, it's Genesis with 2 noons. In the critical text, it's Genesis with 1 noon. Now, there is a huge difference. The Textus Receptus would read birth there, but because it's only got 1 noon there, it matches in the critical text with the Genesis behind generation here. That's why they make it the book of the genealogy, or the book of the birth roll of Jesus, or this is about Jesus's birth, instead of being generation being more in line with Genesis chapter 2 verse 4. These are the generations of the heaven and earth. This is what Jesus did. This is what Jesus created or made. Like the word Genesis, we know what Genesis means. The book of beginnings. This is the book of what Jesus brought forth. From the beginning to the end, Jesus, he did this. He healed the sick. He died on the cross. He started the church. This is what he generated. So it's very different to the book of the genealogy, and so he doesn't have that distinction there. And this is what I find is many times in Westcott and Hort's text, they're doing these type of underlying changes which are in the Greek, but they would footnote it, and they would have here birth, and then down in verse 18 they would have a footnote saying generation, so that they mean the same thing, but they don't. In the critical text, they're the same Greek word, but not in the TR. That's been changed. And so, so none of the critical text Bibles have generation. So it's quite deceptive. You know what I mean? He's saying, this would be as if the King James translators, translated the text underlying the ESV. So that's what he says here. On the right is the KJV, as if it were based on the Greek text underlying the ESV and other modern Bible translations. So, but there's that failure to understand the redefinition of that term. So this website is simply designed to make out that there's not that many changes between the Textus Receptus and the critical text. And so these were some of the changes that we pointed out that initially, like Asaph and Asa. So the King James perfectly has Asa, because this is a genealogical list and matches with the Old Testament, where Asaph, he's a psalmist, but he doesn't fit there. He's not a king. And it's interesting, Bruce Metzger, he says the correct reading is Asaph. And he says Matthew actually made the mistake. So in the originals, it's a mistake. So this is Bruce Metzger, the guru of the critical text. This is the guy who, Mark Ward would say is amazing. James White would say is amazing. Bart Ehrman, he's like his final student and all this sort of stuff. And he's basically saying that Matthew made the error. So it's in the originals, it has this error. So that's why I pointed that out to him. I said, it's not just a name. This is very important because of what's being said by critical text guys. And so then you got Amon, which is absolutely correct in the King James. Amon, you got lists of genealogies that match that in the Old Testament. But here you've got Amos. Okay, there's the book of Amos, but it's not matching the list of kings here. And so And so, anyway, I'm digressing. I want to show you some other mistakes that he's got. So let's just quickly jump to John and chapter 7. Okay, so we'll just go down here. So the Bible is very clear that Jesus isn't a liar. Now, Jesus would have been obligated to actually go to this feast. So to say that he's not going to the feast would make him a liar. But notice he's got, go ye up unto this feast, and he's got the feast. But he says, I go not up yet unto this feast. But he has it on both sides. Okay, so I'll just quickly go to John chapter 7, verse 8. John chapter 7, verse 8 in maybe something like Bible Hub, where we can just quickly look at the Greek. But you notice the ESV says, I am not going up to this feast. The King James says, I am not going up yet. One, he's saying he's not going. King James is saying, I'm not going up yet. So it's very clear. I've actually had atheists pull me over the coals with this issue, saying, oh, it was okay for Jesus to lie to his brethren, so it's okay for me to lie. And so, but let's just look at the Greek here. So this is quite a major issue. This is something that I bring up quite often to show that there are errors in the text. So let's look at what we've got here. Parallel Bible. And it clearly says, you go up to the feast. I am not going up to the feast. This for my time has not been fulfilled. So yet is not there. Okay, so I'm just trying to see if I can see that difference in the Greek there. I can't just find it without boring you guys. And so, but it's very clear that this yet should be there. And this is just this is only like a 10, 15-minute look at this website. I was just like, okay, I'll just point out some of the issues. Okay, so I thought I'll go to Revelation chapter 1, verse 8, because I've often found issues, in doing these studies. And when I was doing the Revelation 16:5 book that I've got, I found the critical text just does a front lobal lobotomy on the Textus Receptus. So here he's saying in verse 8, the only change is God. Okay? But it has the beginning and the ending. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord. Okay, so let's just have a quick look here. We'll just go to Revelation chapter 1. I might just change it up here. Verse 8. Okay, so notice here they have that in brackets. Now, I'm not saying that that's actually the Westcott and Hort text. That's actually their own Greek text in Bible Hub. So I probably should have made that clear. But when you just look, say here, so this is NA 27. So, I know there's no difference between that and the 28 here. So it has ego iemi to alpha kai to omega, lege kurios ho theos. So the ho theos is God. Hoon kaho en kaho ekomenos ho pentokrator. And so clearly it doesn't have arche kitelos. Okay, so you can see that it doesn't have arche kitelos here. So this is the Scrivener's text. Arche kitelos is in Stephanus' text. So the TR editions have that. And that is the beginning and the ending. So he doesn't know. So this is the thing. Mark Ward doesn't know there's a difference there. He has no idea. So his website, where he's claiming that you don't have to read Greek, you just have to read my English website and you'll see all the differences. No, you'll see just a few crumbs of differences. There's so many differences that he doesn't deal with. And I'm not just talking about, like I said before, a few redefinitions behind the scenes that changes a few words here and there. I'm talking about this is the beginning and the end, 5 words in English, and he is saying that it's in the critical text when it's not. So, so I've written here, but beginning and the ending is omitted in the Greek. But once again, after just a 10-minute look at this page, many, many more errors occur. And we are not even dealing with redefined words, such as I looked up Acts chapter 12, verse 4. Easter is just translated as Easter here. It's like, but all the modern Bibles translate it as Passover. And the thing is, people like James White, people who hate, the term Easter, these guys would say, oh, well, if the King James translators were living today, they would definitely not use these terms because we have more information, But Mark Ward seems to think that they would use Easter. Mark Ward doesn't believe Easter is a pagan festival, just like I've been proving since 1995 when I wrote my article. But he's going at loggerheads with someone like James White, who does think it is a pagan festival. So, these guys aren't in agreement. So this is a glaring testimony against Mark Ward's scholarship here. The beginning and the ending, critical text. That's ridiculous. Okay, so let's just quickly look at Matthew chapter 10, table of contents. Matthew chapter 10, verse 8, where the TR, has heal the sick. Actually, that is not a good example. I'm going to delete that. I will go to, well, I think I've just shown you enough. And so just a quick cursory look, you find all these mistakes, and it's like, so let's have a look. So what's this site about? So we go to this website, and they're saying they're using the Nestle 28. Well, the current edition of the critical text used by them. But see, the thing is, even the New King James and the MEV, there's hundreds of differences between those and the King James. And so while they're saying it's using the same Greek text, there are places where they do depart from the Greek text, by the way. A lot of people, go crazy when you point those things out. But the New King James and the MEV have so many different changes. And so, and people are basically saying, well, if the King James translators were here today, they would translate it that way. But Mark Ward's saying, no, the King James translators were here today and used the ESV text. They would translate it this way. And so he's going against a lot of translators and what they would say. So let's just have a quick look at the table of contents and what he says, actually. Maybe it's under study guide. Yeah, so he has like group projects, have each student take at least 5 of the following passages chosen at random by a computer. So let's go to Matthew 15. And so then we go through, there's hardly any. And then there's, and or his mother commandment, so it's like, there's just one verse there. But see, the problem is, like I've shown you, how can we trust this website? I've just gone through a few basic things, and there's so much that's unchanged and so much that's not shown. And look here, read the explanation in Metzger's textual commentary on the Greek New Testament, or Philip W. comforts. So he's saying to go to Metzger. He's saying to go to Metzger. But if we go to Metzger in Matthew chapter 1, Metzger says Matthew made errors. See, this is the problem. Mark Ward, he is, he's based most of his ministry, he's written the book Authorized, and he's basically like, I don't want to deal with textual issues. I just don't want to deal with it. I just want to deal with readability. Okay. And then he's making out that, the readability issue, that's just the main thing. And it's like, you talk to any TR KJV person, some people will say, oh, I don't find the King James hard to read at all. And so usually they're people who are reading the King James day in, day out, and they just get used to it. But Trinitarian Bible Society brought out a list of 700, and I think there's a few hundred where it's obsolete, archaic words. I think it's 136 or something. And so, sorry about my throat here. It's very early in the morning. I've just woken up and I saw this thing. I thought I've got to make a video on this. And so, yeah, D.A. Waite, he's done his defined version. I've worked on the KJV 2016 edition. And so the reason that I've done that is because I look at the New King James, I look at the MEV, and to me, they're so filled with errors that I was like, I'll try and provide a translation that is faithful to the King James, that would be just a modern update of the King James rather than, with all this, Westcott and Hort definitions in them, and the New King James does have readings from, NIV, NASB, and other editions. And on my website, I clearly prove that. If you go to tr.org.au, that's a very simple domain, tr.org.au, you can see, if you could click on or search in the search bar for New King James and KJV, you'll get to the page and you can see where I've just got a small list of differences between the King James and the New King James, and it's quite alarming. And also I've got departures from the Textus Receptus where at times they're only usually small, but sometimes they're very significant, where it will have like Revelation chapter 19. The King James will say the white robes are the righteousness of the saints. New King James says it's the righteous acts, or like the works of the saints. We're not saved by works. The righteousness that we have is from Christ, not by our works, So anyway, hopefully this video will show you that Mark Ward's website is pretty much a glaring example of how poor Mark Ward's scholarship is. So whenever I watch his videos, I'm just watching someone who is almost completely illiterate in the whole issue of how many different variant, and he doesn't want to talk about variants. He doesn't want to talk about textual issues with the TR. And I know recently he talked about Scrivener, but it's like he's made a point. I don't want to talk about that. I just want to talk about readability and the plowboy and all this sort of stuff. And it's like King James people have been pointing that out for a long time and making lists and saying, well, this is how this word's defined and all the rest of it. Mark Ward makes out that King James people probably would never use an Oxford English dictionary. I mean, really, if you find an archaic term, you can just Google it nowadays and you'll find out exactly what it means. But the thing is, I've done the work that I've done with the 2016 edition. D.A. Waite's done his work. Trinitarian Bible Society done their work. And it's like Mark Ward's just come along like, getting paid. Notice he's getting paid to do this by Lexham Press. And Lexham Press, they also have a Catholic branch called Verbum. But you didn't know that. And so, Faith Life, these are the guys pushing Michael Heiser's stuff of the councils and toying with the whole concept of the Book of Enoch and all this stuff, and what a local flood and basically believing in evolution. They promote these guys, Michael Heiser. So he's in a deeply compromised business, basically, and they've said demonize the King James and promote these new versions, and that's exactly what he's doing. And so he attacks King James believers, and he just makes, which TR edition, and these guys are attacking people, good people, who just want to, read the Bible. They just want a Bible without errors. I mean, if you had a mathematics book, you would expect it to be without errors. If it had 1 + 1 = 2, um, in the original, you would expect that to follow through to today. That we have, if God wrote a book on mathematics, you would expect it to be accurate today. But they believe that Matthew said 1 + 1 = 3 in the genealogies. So there's genealogical errors, historical errors, there's translational errors, there's Greek solecisms, there's a whole bunch of issues. But he only wants to deal with readability. You can have the most readable Bible in the world, or readable book, if you want to call their one a Bible. You can have the most readable Bible in the world, but at the end of the day, if it's based upon a bad text, it's just a piece of junk. Because if you have the Jehovah's Witness text, we know that it's based upon the same Greek text here, as the critical text. Their one is just rubbish. I mean, we know there are rubbish Bibles. Mark Ward's doing videos about the Passion Translation saying it's a rubbish Bible. But see, the thing is, we just have a higher standard where he's like, oh, you can't really just change, the paraclete into, instead of being a comforter or a helper, and they're both fine. One's Old King James, one's New King James. But the Passion Translation has, I'll send you another savior. It's like, whoa, I think they might have actually changed that. But that's how low their standards are. You have to commit blasphemy in these other Bibles for them to be thrown out. Where TR, King James people, we just have a higher standard. We believe that God has preserved his words. We believe that those words are found clearly in the King James Version. And we believe them. It's so simple. Where he's trying to throw dust in the air, he's trying to throw mud around and trying to confuse you over, where we find the Bible. And he'll say that all the modern Bibles are an embarrassment of riches, using, Dan Wallace's term about the manuscripts that the Byzantine manuscripts, they all get thrown in the bin anyway. They only go for Vaticanus and Sinaiticus usually. It's like, oh, we've got this embarrassment of riches. We've got 5,300 manuscripts. It's like, yeah, most of them you don't even look at or acknowledge. It's like, just look at last 12 verses of Mark where they throw all of those in the bin and they go for Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. It's just very clear that that's what they do. And so at 1 John 5:7, they're not interested in what the majority text says. They're only interested in trying to disprove a King James TR position. They don't go to the majority of the Latin. They don't go into the grammatical evidence. And so this is what I find with these critical text guys. They're not willing to do the homework in every area. They're only willing to do, I only deal with the readability of the King James. It's deceptive. They're giving you half of the answer. Or half of the evidence, which is a lie. If you stand in front of the court and you say, you know, if you say a half truth is a lie. And so this is what Mark Ward does. Oh, this website is for people who don't read Greek. You can just clearly see where these differences are in English, and just on a 10-minute cursory breeze through his site, it's like error after error after error. It's like, what's the point? Yeah, and this shows how poor Mark Ward's scholarship is. So anyway, that's the end of my video. I just thought I'd throw that in the mix. Um, like, subscribe, comment. It'll be good to get some comments on this. I'm going to put this on Mark Ward's YouTube channel. Usually he avoids anything like this because it deals with real issues. He would rather have, some hillbilly guy, say, hey, I like the King James and your scholars are all liberals, or, just he doesn't want to deal with technical issues because I don't think he can. I seriously don't think that a lot of these critical text guys have the bullets to come against the TR position. All they can do is ad hom argumentation, and give you half truths. Like this whole entire website is just a half truth. And so, Anyway, I'll leave it there. God bless you guys. Thanks for listening.